Hey everyone, Jane here, back with another crochet tutorial, and this time it's all about color. One of the most common questions I get is about my process for choosing colors. So today is all about sharing some tips and tricks I use to decide on the perfect combinations for my granny squares. While my final decisions are based on how the colors feel to me, I do follow a process to give myself options. So today I'm going to walk you through some of those. So one way I start is by browsing my camera roll. I love snapping quick photos of anything that catches my eye. Nature scenes, especially sunrises and sunsets, or even plants in my garden, these are all my favorites. I also have an inspiration board over on Pinterest where I save images with cool color combos. These are the sources that kick in my inspiration, and these I can do anytime, anywhere. From there, I'll gather a range of yarn colors to experiment with. I do this with my little baskets of sample squares, but before I get into that, understanding the basics of the color wheel can be really helpful. So don't worry, we're not diving too deep into theory here, but let's quickly review this. So we start with primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. Remember those paint bottles from school? Those are the foundations for all colors. Next, we have the secondary colors, green, orange, and purple. These are created by mixing the primary colors. And then we have what's called the tertiary colors, and these are the blends of primary secondary colors, which often make up a rich, varied palette, kind of like my yarn wall. Then we have the neutral colors, which are white, black, gray, and I include browns there when we're talking about yarn. These are often used as background colors to create balance and give space for the main colors to be the star of the show. We're also going to touch on color value, which is the light and darkness of a color, but that's something I'm just going to demonstrate a little bit later. So back to my sample squares. These are like fabric samples or paint chips for me. For every new yarn I bring into my home, I make a quick square using my Easy Breezy square pattern. I like them all to be the same so that I can compare them easily. It's a simple square with a few stitch variations to add texture, so I can see how the color works in a granny square context. And I keep these samples organized by color baskets. You can find the tutorial for the Easy Breezy square in the description below, but you can use any square of your choosing. Basket 1 has all the reds, blues, greens, yellows, purples, and oranges, and all the variations in between. And basket 2, which oddly has the same number of samples, has all my neutrals. So I have in there all my whites, my grays, my blacks, my browns, and the beiges. I don't label these squares because I handle them a lot and the labels tend to fall off. So instead, I have a binder where I keep samples of all my yarns with the brand information. And that way I can keep all the brands together. This helps me keep track because sometimes yarns get discontinued, so it's nice to have a record here so I can find a nice substitute if I need to. If you're interested in making yourself a yarn binder, I do have a tutorial on my YouTube channel as well for that. Again, the link will be in the description below. So let's take a look at an example here. This square is my sand dollar squared pattern, which I made using a fall-inspired palette that also works well for the holidays. I pulled reds, greens, amber tones, and neutrals to figure out what I wanted to use in this square. For most squares, I stick to about 3 to 4 colors at the most, but for larger squares, I may use more colors. And definitely for blankets, I like to use a lot of colors, like 10 to 15 colors, to get that nice eclectic look that I spread out among all the squares. I like to dabble a little in quilting too, so I love scrap quilts, and this definitely inspires my approach to crochet. I'll have a future video on how I work out all the square combos for a full blanket, because once I've chosen the 10 to 15 colors, then I have to figure out how I want to arrange them in the blanket so that it balances. So watch for that one too, coming soon. Once I've narrowed down my choices, I make a variety of test squares, experimenting with different color orders to see what works best and which one feels the nicest. Now let's talk about color value, the lightness or darkness of a color. This can significantly affect how patterns stand out. My trick to determine the color values is taking a photo of my squares, usually on my phone, and then I desaturate it on my phone as well to help me see the value of the colors. So even though they're all red, I can now see which ones are light and which ones are dark. This might be obvious when you're dealing with one color, but it gets a little more complicated when you're dealing with a whole bunch of colors. Let me show you an example. Here's a square where I used a green, a red, a caramel, and a putty. When I desaturate the picture, you can see the green and red are similar in value. The caramel is slightly lighter and the putty is much lighter, creating a lot more contrast. Using this technique really helps me decide on what look I'm going for. And it's really just about the value of the color that you're looking at. Let's compare 5 versions of this square using the same 4 colors. Which one do you like best? Pause the video to decide and choose your favorite. Have you got your favorite? Now, let's desaturate them to check the values. Does your choice still hold up? Or have you changed your mind? This trick helps when I'm stuck between a few options. Sometimes I want colors with similar values for a softer, calmer look, while other times I prefer a high contrast for a bold statement. As you can see with these 2 examples, the square on the left gives you a much calmer look, and the square on the right has more of a statement. This shows up when you desaturate and look at the values. I hope these ideas inspire you to play with color and develop your own palettes. These are just some of my tips and tricks. Let me know how these tips work for you, and I will be creating more videos going forward on how I choose my colors specifically for certain squares. I'll walk you through the process in those videos. So stay tuned for those. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any of my upcoming tutorials. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.